Drivers, start your engines!
Pick the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweating working for the man, alright. Well, hey. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save a baby from the burning building. Take her home with the sprinklers on, alright. Well,
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey, race fans, welcome to Drafting the Circuits on the Whoobazoo Radio Network. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we go over the racing season. It is our first show of 2018. It's great to be back on the air. Let me introduce to you the panel that we have in the studio tonight. First and foremost, Mr. Gray Warren from Richard Childress. How are you tonight, Gray?
I'm doing fine. Hope everyone else is.
All right, good to talk to you, Gray. Joey Barnes, president of Motorsports Tribune and writer for Indycar.com. Joey, good to have you in the house tonight. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks
All right.
for having me.
Richard Uden, looking for work?
Still looking for work.
Still looking for work. Anybody out there need a top-notch engineer and a guy who's really funny around the office, give Richard Uden a call. Richard, how are you tonight?
I'm very good. Happy New Year to everybody.
Oh, fantastic. Seth Eggert in the house, writes for Motorsports Tribune. Seth, how are you?
I'm doing great.
All right, good to talk to you, Seth. And last but not least, Mr. Christopher DeHardy, joining us for a few minutes from Indianapolis. Chris, how are you tonight?
Fantastic. Got another overnight to do tonight.
All right, well, we'll rest well while you work all night. So anyway, guys, we've been off the air since around Thanksgiving. It's great to be back on. There's been a lot that's gone on in the past couple of months. There's one thing I do want to mention. I'd be remiss if I did not mention that the racing world lost a legend recently. There are those that come and go and make contributions to the sport and are remembered greatly. And then there are those whose name just becomes synonymous with auto racing. And Mr. Dan Gurney certainly was in the latter category. So, that's a guy that we all know. That's a guy who's contributed a lot to the sports. We're going to miss him tremendously. Our thoughts are with his family, his friends, and those close to him. But Racing World will miss Mr. Dan Gurney. And another note, a lot of us are very familiar with Donald Davison, who is a walking encyclopedia of knowledge of the Indianapolis Speedway and the Indianapolis 500 motor race. He is the official historian for the Speedway. Donald's wife, Sherry, passed away a few days ago as well, and so our thoughts and prayers are with Donald Davison and his family. So with that being said, let's talk about some of the headlines of the off-season. There have been a lot of movement, a lot of significant drivers. I don't know what just sounds wrong, Joey, but we've got new teams in IndyCar. We've got a new car. We'll be testing that. A certain Miss Danica Patrick has kept her name in the news. Her favorite color is green because she signed GoDaddy as a sponsor for the Danica Double, her farewell tour, and she's began dating Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers. Keep with that green theme. So Danica has her deal done for Daytona with Premium Motorsports, and that's going to be in alliance with Richard Childress Racing. She's got GoDaddy in tow. With money for an Indianapolis 500 ride. So, Gray Warren, Premium Motorsports, Danica Patrick, what are your thoughts?
I figured, if she started shopping the deal around that someone would bite, and of course GoDaddy and Danica have a long relationship, and it makes perfect sense. Premium bought the assets of Tommy Baldwin Racing, and Actually, Danica got her first start in the Daytona 500 in a Tommy Baldwin car, albeit kind of a a shadow car, if you will, kind of with help from Stuart Haas, but and Tony Uri was the crew chief at one time. So I think that's kind of a coming around full circle for her to finish her NASCAR career. But hey, it's a good thing. She's going to create some buzz and probably bring a few fans to the racetrack.
And now, as far as her other half of her double, I'll throw this to you, Christopher, since you don't have a lot of time before you need to leave us. We realize the top teams have pretty much said, hey, good luck, but we really don't have a spot for you. But there are a few seats left here and there. What are you hearing down there in Indianapolis?
Not really all that much for now. It's the same name's been floated around for the last few days, so nothing really new has really struck me, so to speak.
And that name being Dreyer and Reinbold?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Though it would be interesting to see a Danica Sage Karam combo at Dreyer and Reinbold, but Dreyer and Reinbold didn't have that good of a result last year because of I think it was a bum alternator that they had. But if they can get their stuff together, and Danica with her record at the Speedway, she could give them a formidable run. But there's a lot of wild cards going into this year's race with the new aero kits as well.
Chris, realistically, we were sitting here trying to think, and just we were talking about maybe just there hasn't been a dollar figure announced for this package, and we were trying to think about it. Obviously, they'll probably get for doing a one-off race in a stock car race at Daytona. I'm going to say probably $500,000, $500,000 to do that race. What's a figure that a team would look at to do a one-off Indy 500?
I'd say that's actually a realistic goal. The problem is that the purse is so small that if you don't finish in the top 10, you're going to make only $200,000. So I mean, what sense does it make to spend $500,000 to win $200,000?
Yeah, I didn't know. Most people figured when teams sit down and do a budget, they'll budget. And of course, things being a little bit different now than they were a couple of years ago. But you can figure somewhere around a team will budget about $500,000, and that's a top team asking that per race. I didn't know if that how that translated on the Indycar side. That's what I was trying to get. So you think maybe if she could garner $1 million from GoDaddy and split it down the middle, that would be attractive for potential car owner?
Hopefully, the less money you have to spend, the more money you can make.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know exactly how much GoDaddy has, allowed her to, or has paid her for this deal. And I'm certain we're going to see her in a new series of GoDaddy commercials in order to make that work. But there really haven't been any numbers announced. But real quick before we get off of Danica and let Aaron Rodgers get on. I want to throw to you, Joey Barnes, your thoughts with the new car, the new Aero, and doing a one-off at Indy. Not just Danica, but some of the other teams that are going to be just doing an Indy-only effort. Your Sage Karams, your Jack Harvey with his limited deal. We'll be doing a few other races. Elio Castroneves. Will the lack of testing time in the new car hurt these guys, or do you think there's enough practice time at Indy that it's going to be rather even?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Indy, that's the one benefit that you get from the month of May, right? It's just how much track time you get. You get roughly, 2 weeks, I want to say, 10 days of track activity there on the oval. So if there's a race that you're going to do, I mean, a lot of people mentioned Alonso kind of came into it and took it to it like a duck to water, but the reality is, A, talent transcends, and B, when you're given that much practice time, I mean, you can develop quite a bit in a short amount of time. So I think she's going to be fine. I think this new car is going to really cater to the guys who were really good and dominant during the Champ Car era, because the body style of this car simulates that. I think some of the Indy Lights drivers coming up, because the IL-15, the systems, a lot of what's what I've heard, they emulate that. So I think that the people that are kind of in the middle might struggle some, but I feel like those two bookends of those spectrum, the Champ Car and the Indy Lights era, I think they're going to do really well and come out of the box strong for this year. But I know Dry and Reinbold was something that was mentioned with Danica. I would go a step further. Obviously, there's some ties there as far as personnel and why Dry and Reinbold makes sense. But one of the other things that kind of makes sense to me from the outside looking in might be Juncos Racing. I know it's a very outside and it's kind of a, what the hell are you talking about kind of thing, but they ran 2 cars last year. Kyle Kaiser's going to run the Indy 500, but the other car's still open. They're not going to give it to one of their new driver that's kind of in there, and Rene Bender. He's not assigned for those 4 races. So one of his 4 races isn't the Indy 500. So if they're looking for somebody to occupy a car, that could certainly be an avenue. And if she comes with money, that they're going to listen. Otherwise, they go the Sebastian Saavedra route. But I see that kind of being a situation that makes a lot more sense.
Very quick question, guys. Will Danica have to do the rookie orientation at Indy, or does her sort of previous experience still count?
Oh, her previous.
I think
she's good.
Refresher. I think she'll have a refresher though.
Right, but those refreshers are generally not required. But it's extra track time. There's no reason.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll.
Do it,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'll be fascinated to see if, like last year, because I know we're going to touch on some of the new teams and things like that. Harding Racing confirmed their entry to the Indy 500 and all that stuff, and that they were doing a few races with the Gabby. They were testing at Texas in April. So I'm kind of interested to see if they're going to do any testing with Danica before we get to Indy. But that's really the only thing I'm kind of curious about, whoever she's with.
Yeah, well, she's got free time, for sure, so without the full-time ride. But, it's I don't know if this is coming at the right time in her career. It's certainly, to a lot of folks in NASCAR anyway, the fans I'm talking about feel like she's worn out her welcome, and people are just sick of hearing about her. But to a lot of IndyCar fans are kind of excited to have her back. She was she did much better in an IndyCar than she has in a NASCAR. She won a race. She's certainly caused some excitement at the Speedway. She's the only female driver out there to lead laps late in the race at the Speedway. So I think it'll be interesting to see her back in the car. I don't know how rusty she's going to be. But eyeballs on the television set and butts in the grandstands is a good thing, no matter what.
That's right. Bringing money and attention to the sport is not bad. There's no such thing as bad publicity. So, yeah, I think it'll create a buzz during the month of May, and it'll create a little bit of a buzz in February, and I think more so in May than February. But I think that'll be good.
That'll be good.
Be a story to follow.
Absolutely. So now, Richard, you're our resident Formula One analyst, and so we've spent a lot of time last year talking about Robert Kubica and the Williams, and he came so close to getting that ride after everything he's been through with the injury and the time out of racing. But it looks like, it's confirmed that ride is going to go to Sergei Sorokin. So, Richard, tell us a little bit about Sergei, and what do you feel like his chances are with the Williams car, partnering alongside young Lance Stroll?
It's an interesting move. They're going to be in a situation where they've got 2 young drivers in there. I know in some ways that's not what they wanted. I think they'd like the idea of having an experienced driver in there with backing, and with that little bit of experience behind them. Sergei's been a test driver or in the driver development program for Renault for a number of years now. And when Williams first looked at him, there were some senior Renault guys there that were quite enthusiastic about him getting the opportunity to drive that car. Whether he's still part of the Renault stable of drivers or if this is a clean break on the contract, I'm not sure. You often see drivers being loaned out from one team to another, like Carlos Sainz Jr. is still sort of has close links to the Red Bull group, even though he's moved on from there in the short term. I think that at the end of the day, money talks within the Williams organisation at the moment. They're not in the position they were in the 90s, as we all know, where they could take their pick of any driver on the grid, as they so often did. Lance had some good races last year, and the first half dozen or so were a little bit rocky, but then he started to pick up, and he had a great result in Baku there, and he had a great qualifying in Monza, had a good strong racing at his home race in Montreal. So there's definitely talent there. Hopefully at some point people will start to put to bed the concept that he's a paid driver and that he actually does have some ability. And to bring this young kid in alongside him, there's been talk that the Stroll family didn't want Kubica in there in case he sort of upstaged Lance. I don't know how much sway the Stroll family has within the Williams group. Obviously, they're putting a huge amount of money in there now, so there's that potential. That's true. I wouldn't want to say for certain, but it's the fairy tale of seeing Kubica in the car is gone. But he's still around. He's their test driver for next year and their development driver and the simulator driver. So if Sergey doesn't work out, then the good thing from a Williams perspective is they don't have too far to look to get Kubica in the car. And Kubica did put a financial package together. The rumor was that he'd agreed a $7 million or €7 million package to get in the first 7 races, but obviously Sorokin's bringing more money than that, and he's got the deal for the full season and what they considered to be a multi-year deal from what Williams was saying. But then Williams, to the same extent, weren't counting out Kubica for 2019, so unless they're going to start running 3 cars at that team, I don't quite see how that's all going to work.
No, I don't see how that's going to work at all. As a matter of fact, I think this day and age, Formula One rules prohibit 3 cars, don't they?
At the moment, there's been a lot of talk for a number of years to try and bolster the field by the likes of Ferrari, Red Bull. If you finished in the top 4 in the championship, you would be required to run a 3rd car for the following season. But that was just when the grids were down and trying to bolster teams coming in and making sure you had a reasonable number of cars out there every weekend.
Yeah, it is kind of a silly rule, though, because, if you go back to the 70s and 80s, there would be, McLaren would occasionally add a 3rd car just to evaluate a guy.
Yeah.
That was Villeneuve's first test in a car. I remember the Walter Wolf team put Bobby Rahal in a 3rd car in Canada and in Watkins Glen just to evaluate him as a driver. So, why that's kind of against the rules, it really makes no sense when the more the merrier when you figure there's only 18, 20 cars on the F1 grid right now.
Yeah, I think it's the perceived concept in Formula One that they don't want to publicly admit they're struggling, and that's what that's the ruling would be. Oh, if we're struggling to get teams, then we have to go and get other teams from other cars from other teams. It's like, oh, hang on, that means Formula One's struggling. It doesn't want to be seen to be struggling.
All right. So now, Seth, you've been quiet over there. So I'm going to bring you into the conversation. Seth, you cover NASCAR full-time. You also pay a bit of attention to the Junior Series, the Xfinity, and the Truck Series. We've got Daytona Speed Weeks coming up that's going to kick off with the Rolex 24 here, which will begin nearly an entire month of racing activity at Daytona, including ARCA, trucks, Xfinity. So, Seth, talk about some of the new faces in new places we're going to see in NASCAR this year.
Well, let's start with the Truck Series. In the Truck Series, you have Austin Wayne Self and Justin Fontaine at Nice Motorsports, which is an alliance team of GMS Racing. GMS Racing will have Cody Coughlin this year in the number 2 Jegs truck. You have Justin Haley returning, Dalton Sargent as a rookie, and Johnny Sauter. They are the lead Chevy truck team. Now, the Truck Series is also going to be using a spec Ilmore engine, which is based off of a Chevy motor. Toyota, with Kyle Busch Motorsports, they're going to have, at least at Daytona, David Gilliland in the number 4 truck. They're going to have Noah Gragson back, and Spencer Davis will make his debut in the number 51 truck. Doorsport Racing, which was a Toyota team, is switching to Ford. they will still have Matt Crafton, Grant Enfinger, and Ben Rhodes back. Ettore hasn't announced a driver yet. Ryan Truex is moving up to the Xfinity Series. There's still a few truck teams here and there that are still expected to have some sort of announcement soon as to their driver lineup and their plans. Nemco comes to mind with John Hunter moving up to the Xfinity Series. Otherwise, the truck series, as of right now, there's about 17, 18 full-time drivers and maybe 25 full-time teams. The Xfinity Series is looking a lot better, about 38 to 40 full-time teams. You have Ryan Truex, as I said, he's moving up to Colleague Racing, replacing Blake Cook. You have Christopher Bell moving up to the Xfinity Series in the Joe Gibbs number 20. You have Brandon Jones moving to Joe Gibbs Racing. You have Matt Tifft moving from Joe Gibbs to Richard Childress Racing. Brendan Gaughan is stepping away from full-time racing. He's going to run at least Mid-Ohio and Road America for RCR. Tyler Reddick is moving from Ganassi to Junior Motorsports, replacing William Byron. You have John Hunter Nemechek running part-time with Jamie McMurray and Kyle Larson in the number 42 Ganassi car. Brennan Poole's not returning to Ganassi. They haven't announced whether they would still run their second car, or Brennan Poole announced his plans. You have Ryan Preece running 10 races for Gibbs. He's splitting time in the number 18 with Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, and others. Let's see. You have Ryan Sieg returning. You have a new team, JP Motorsports, the number 55 with Stephen Light. You have Next Gen Motorsports, which is going to run part-time in Xfinity and trucks with Landon Huffman and several other drivers. Otherwise, for some of the main parts of the Xfinity Series, the names are the same: Cole Custer, Elliott Sadler, Justin Allgaier. They're still in the same cars they were last year. I want to say there's still a little bit of news for the Xfinity Series, but not much.
Okay, Seth, thank you for your very
quick. I got a quick
detailed
question.
report. Yeah, I want to throw to you, Gray, here, because I want to go ahead and start a session. I want to talk a little bit about the new Chevrolet car, because Gray, I know you guys over there, Richard Childress, are working hard on your cars for Daytona in a couple weeks. So go ahead and throw your question to Seth, and then let's talk about that new Chevrolet package for NASCAR.
Yeah, I just want to confirm. Thor bought the assets from Brad Keselowski's truck team. Is that correct?
Actually, the assets of Brad Keselowski Racing were bought by a combination of Jesse Little's team, Next Gen Motorsports, and Dorsport Racing. Dorsport is also going to have some new Ford F-150s that they built in-house.
Okay. I just want, I knew that equipment went somewhere, and I knew, and it was kind of at the last minute that Thor, announced that they were leaving Toyota, and of course at that time they just said they were leaving Toyota and did not announce a manufacturer.
Matt Crafton during the media tour yesterday said he found out last week, and he re-signed with them back in October. So with how quick the change was, they probably were also entertaining Chevrolet as well.
And that brings us to the new Chevrolet, for the new Camaro. And, of course, work goes on. Anytime there's a model change, all your chassis have to be stripped and skinned. And, we're working hard doing that. We've got I've been picking up sheet metal, it seems like, every day for the last 10 days. GM's picked up the pace and delivering more and more sheet metal, and we're skinning more and more cars for not only our team but our alliance teams as well. A lot of hope, that this new Chevrolet is gonna close the gap with the Toyota somewhat. We'll just have to see. A lot of development work still to go on. We're going to the wind tunnel, along with the other Chevrolet teams, trying to develop this body, and we'll see what becomes of it. But most of the Chevrolet teams are real excited about the model change, and we'll see where it goes. And of course, that on the Xfinity side, we're working hard there too. Of course, most of the races next year are going to be, or all the races are going to be with the new composite body. And I think basically that's just a forerunner for what's going to probably happen in a couple of years. In Cup, we'll probably be switching to composite bodies in the Cup Series by, I'm going to say, 2020. We'll probably experiment with it some in 2019.
Yeah, because the sheet metal seems a bit outdated. But Grant, I want to ask you, for those of us not as technically astute as say you guys, so when you're reskinning the car, you're going from the SS to the Camaro package. Is there anything internally different with the car with the new skin? Say, position of brake ducts or radiator position, anything like that change with that body, or is it just simply just aerodynamic?
Yeah, things like that will change when you put a new body on because the nose will be different. So obviously your intake, your radiator intake is going to be different. We're running a spec radiator now. All the teams run the same radiator at both speedways and downforce tracks. So yeah, we've had to redesign our ductwork for the new car, and the brake ducts also had to be redesigned as well. So yeah, that's ongoing. So yeah, the chassis is the same basically, except for some technical updates. With the suspension, some of the mounting points for the suspension components will change from time to time, and we'll update some of the chassis that we had from last year. But we're skinning everything in the shop. We've stripped all the cars off, and complete new bodies are going on them, and we've got them lined up in the shop, and they go to the fab shop one by one to have new bodies applied. So quite a lot. We've had probably when you count the Alliance teams that we're doing, that includes Petty's, some stuff for the 95, some stuff for the 13 team. Those cars, we've probably between Christmas and let's say through mid-March, we've got about between 50 and 60 cars to do.
It's a tall order. So
yeah, it's hectic at the shop. Yeah, guys are putting in a lot of time.
I'm sure Richard has a comment. Maybe we shouldn't.
I do have a question.
Touch on that. Go right ahead, Seth.
My one question is, I know back in the day when Chevy was switching from the Monte Carlo to the Impala, that NASCAR allowed teams for one season to run the older body. Will NASCAR allow that again for some of the underfunded teams to run the Chevy SS? Because I know I've seen at least two teams that would be brand new, show off brand new painted or skinned SS bodies.
That's a good question. In the old days, you could run bodies several years older, and you could do that. I'm not. I'll tell you what. I'll check on that tomorrow. I don't know if that. NASCAR would approve. This year's Camaro and you say the previous year's Chevy SS, and both would be available and in compliance to run the Cup Series. I'll have to check with that because a lot of that now is dictated by the manufacturer. The manufacturer has that call because if they are helping to supply even the smaller teams with sheet metal to a degree, they will want them in 2018 livery, of course. But I'll inquire about that tomorrow. That is a good question. I thought about that the other day if some of the smaller teams would indeed be able to run the SS. It might hold true more in the Xfinity Series than the Cup Series, but I'll check on that for you.
All right, good stuff. So, listen, Daytona Speedway kicks off with the Rolex 24. Well, that's this weekend. You know, we've had the Rover Tour before the 24, which is actually a little hard to say. Now, Richard, do you follow sports car racing much?
I do try to sort of keep my ear close to the ground with that series, yeah. Okay,
so let's preview a little bit. When we've got it's the first big event to kick off the racing season. You've got a literal who's who of racing from the last 20 years entered in that thing. You know, everybody from 3-time Indy 500 winners like Elio Castro Neves, and Indycar champions like Pagano in there. You've got old-time Indycar guys like Christian Fittipaldi in there. You've got sports car greats like the Taylors. You've got Formula One guys like Lance Stroll entered in that field, and then it's the plethora of manufacturers. So, Richard, what are we realistically looking for when we look at this race? Let's say some of the uninitiated sports car fans. Who are some of the teams to watch?
So for the last few years, your big team that's been pretty dominant in the major series has been your Action Express Racing. They've got quite a big backing through the Cadillac program. So they have a chassis made by Dallara out in Italy, and then they actually buy their engines from Earnhardt Childress Racing. So they've probably been the most dominant team. You have some other large teams in there. You've got I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Some people pronounce it Jota, some people pronounce it Hota. I don't know which way people want to go with that one. There's also guys like United Autosport in there as well. Some big, they're the sort of superstar team, if you like. They're the guys that have the links in with McLaren. So for the Daytona 24 hours that they've got coming up, that's the team that's going to be running your Fernando Alonso's, your Lando Norris's. Bruno Senna's driving for them, Paul di Resta. They're the like superstar team. They struggled a little bit in the testing a couple of weeks ago. They were quite a little bit off the pace. But the interesting thing with that, a lot of people consider the Raw before the 24 to be purely a sort of a testing purpose. But quite often the governing body will manipulate some of the restrictions on the leading cars. So the Cadillac powered cars there, so the Action Express, Wayne Taylor Racing, who have Ryan Hunter-Reay driving for them, they've actually had some restrictions put on their engine, so they're in theory going to dock them a little bit.
Yeah, I read a few things about that, and there are folks out there who believe that this is manufactured racing. Yeah, the comment I read was from a long-time writer that writes about IndyCar. He said that this is what you get when now that IMSA's run by NASCAR is this manufactured racing. Do you agree? Disagree?
I disagree. I mean, it's not if it was a 25-minute race or a half-hour race, yeah, I can understand. But this is a 24-hour race. To win a 24-hour race, as we've seen so often in the past, you need a lot more than just purely to have the fastest car. I mean, Alonso and Lando Norris turned around in an interview the other day and said, we can't win this race on pace, even though the Cadillac cars have been restricted. They don't think they can win outright. No, I don't think they're manipulating the race. And when you look at the depth of drivers that you have in the field, especially say at Daytona, you have such. I mean, you're just looking at the entry list here. I mean, as you said earlier, it's a who's who. I mean, you look at the Penske team. I mean, you look at their driver lineup. I mean, that's a phenomenal driver lineup there, and nobody's really talked about them through testing. So it's a lot of endurance, a lot of engineering work, a lot of planning by the teams. So no, I don't think a manufactured race is a fair comment.
And to echo in on that. I think, when you talk about the elements of a 24-hour race, and of course reliability and strategy, and a lot of that goes into it. But and you talk about the depth of the field. I remember watching the 24 hours and keeping up with that years and years ago, and the winner would win by the winning team in different classes would win by an ungodly number of laps, and it really wasn't any within the last 5 to 6 hours the race had been pretty much settled. Nowadays, and we've seen this over probably the last decade at Daytona. We've had some really great finishes there. I'm talking in all the classes where you've had 2 or 3 or more cars within a minute of one another racing, and of course the last pit stops were very critical. And I think that comes to with the reliability getting better on these cars, the depth of the field, and obviously the talent, both in the garage and behind the wheel that have really made it. I don't really think you can say it's been manipulated. It sometimes when you tie NASCAR into anything, you try to think that some of the finishes are contrived. But basically, I think we've seen some really good racing down at Daytona with some really good teams, and I think that more than anything has made it more interesting and the competition level go up.
Oh, without a doubt. And the great thing about the IMSA series, or what do you want to call it these days, and these races, especially the 24s, it's not just the prototypes, which is of course the series that everybody looks at, but you've got the 2 sets of GT. I mean, you look at the entry list for the GT class. I mean, you've got, just to look at some Formula One drivers, there are people who've been involved around Formula. You've got Jan Magnussen, Oliver Gavin, let's have a look at Sebastian Bourdais, Ryan Briscoe, Scott Dixon. I mean, they're no slouches. Then you go into the GT Daytona class, and you've got Bruno Junqueira, Jack Hawksworth in there. Mm-hmm. It's the depth. Marcus Winkelhock, throw his name. Pedro Lamy, Matthias Lauda. It's incredible. It really is. It's brilliant.
The teams that are brought to bear in the GT series, of course, Ganassi, a fully funded Ford effort with the GTs. Yeah. That's something to really look for. He's they combine forces with their American team and their European team to run this race. So I mean it's going to be a star-studded field, and I think it's going to be something to look forward to this weekend.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is for anybody that's a race fan out there, if you want to just go down there and get every driver's autograph in the world. There's not a huge crowd there. There's pretty good driver access before and after the race. Buy you a paddock pass, a pit pass, and just again, the list of names on there is incredible. Now, Seth, you went the last 2 years. You went to the 24. So what are you looking at? You're heading down this year again, correct?
No, I'm not heading down there this year.
Okay, then I don't want to talk to you. Now, Joey, you're heading down this year?
No.
No? Okay, you're sending a team down, though, right?
Yeah. Chris is going to be going down there, and he'll be our on-site reporter for the Rolex 24.
Okay, well, Seth, I guess I can let you talk then. What are your thoughts on the 24? I know you've been down there, and I know you had a great time last year because you and I talked after the fact.
Yeah, just as a casual fan being there for the first time, I said last year it was eye-opening, but as Richard was saying, F1 and open wheel, it's a who's who. You also have some NASCAR drivers that are going to be in it. You have Brendan Gaughan, you have AJ Allmendinger, Austin Cindric, just to name a few. And like you said, Ganassi has their Ford effort. This is actually the first time that I can remember in recent years in which there are no NASCAR Ganassi drivers competing in the Rolex 24.
Yeah, I was surprised McMurray wasn't on there. He's done it the last 3-4 years.
Well, this is also the first time in recent years that I don't remember seeing Ganassi even enter their Daytona prototype. But then again, they're now the DPIs, or LMP2, depending on the style car they're running. So I can see with the outdated Daytona prototype, them not running that car. Otherwise, it should be a very interesting battle, especially in GT Daytona, with the sheer number of cars that they have. In total, there's 50 cars on the entry list, and I want to say half of them are GT Daytona cars.
One other point too is I've talked to a lot of guys at our shop this week, and a lot of the NASCAR spotters are going down. In fact, they left today to go down to be at Daytona. They're going to be pulling a lot of time spotting for the ghost cars. A lot of the guys will get their assignments when they get down there. I talked to some of our spotters here for some of our Cup and Xfinity teams are headed down to spot, and some of them know who they're going to be spotting for, but others will get their assignments when they get there. And they'll typically work depending on how many work for a team. They'll work 4 hours on, 4 hours off, or some will do 6 hours on, 6 hours off, and have as many as 3 or 4 spotters for a team. Some as little as 2. And but yeah, that'll be pretty interesting, and it'll have a little bit more of a NASCAR flavor with our spotters going down.
All right, well, I mean, it sounds like it's shaping up to be a great event. Again, Joey and I were discussing this off the air. It's just a blip on the landscape in popular culture, though. It'll probably do, what do you say, Joey, a 0.02 rating?
I was being sarcastic. I mean, I think it'd probably draw a 0.5. I wouldn't be surprised if it drew a 1 even, if I'm honest. But I think internationally, it's going to have a lot of pull.
Oh, internationally for sure. Yeah. Sports car racing has just not caught the the passion of the American race fans since the 70s. When sports cars were pretty big, when you had guys like Dan Gurney and Bruce McLaren and whatnot.
That was the golden age of motorsports.
Exactly.
So when those guys crossed over and ran a little bit of everything, I think it's building a little bit again. I think
it is.
The good thing about the 24 hours of Daytona, it comes at a time when most race fans, I don't care whether you're an Indycar fan or a stock car fan or a dirt car fan, it comes at a time when it's been a long 8 or 9 weeks of winter. Everybody's got a little bit of cabin fever, and I think most of the people that I know are really looking forward to it and get excited about it, because it's really it brings in the new year for a race fan.
Absolutely.
And something I for one look forward to it every year.
So now, what's the television information? Does anybody know? Is it on Fox Sports 1? I
think it's probably splitting between FS1, FS2, and Fox Sports Go like normal.
Yeah. So the overnight stuff will be streaming.
You can go on the IMSA website. I think you can. They'll be doing some live stream too. They have the last several years.
Supposedly it's raining this weekend, which means that plus nighttime, it's going to be awesome. I'm excited. I love the overnight. So
Sunday's the rain day. We were talking about that. The weather said the weather looks good for Saturday, but the rain's going to move in, and quite possibly we could have some rain Sunday sometime. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully not, but like I said, it does. It will make for an interesting show. I know last year the rain they had overnight was torrential, and I think they ran a lot of laps under caution due to that.
Yeah, I was there right when it started raining last year, and just to see cars on a racetrack in the rain, being someone who hasn't seen that before, it was fascinating. And I left before it became a downpour. I went back to the hotel and came back right as the rain was laying up in the morning. But it was just a beautiful sight at night in the rain, the cars going through. I had never seen anything like that before, at least in person.
Yeah, it's really neat. Yeah, because you don't often see cars racing with headlights unless you watch endurance racing. So and the rain just adds an element to racing that you don't get it off, but it really brings out the cream of the crop when it comes to drivers. And to look at some of these guys especially the European guys who are very used to racing in the rain, some of the car control those guys can run the speeds they run, especially on the high bank at Daytona in the rain, is incredible. So with that being said, Rolex 24 coming up this weekend. Joey Barnes, you've been busy writing for Indycar, writing stuff for Motorsports Tribune. There are just a ton of changes. IndyCar coming up this year. We've got a new car. There's a new venue on the schedule with Portland International. We've got 4 new teams. 2 going full-time, 2 going part-time. We've got 7 rookie drivers. If you look at who's going to be eligible for Rookie of the Year, you've got running a full season, Matthias Leist, Robert Wicken, Zach Veach. You've got Jordan King with a partial schedule in the Ed Carpenter car. Jack Harvey doing 6 races. Renee Binder doing 4 races. Kyle Kaiser slated for 4 races. A lot of new faces. You've got guys like Tony Kanaan moving over to AJ Foyt, Takuma Sato, the Indy 500 winner. Won the Indy 500 with Andretti Autosports and pulled a Dan Weldon and switched teams the next year, going over there to Rahal. You've got Ed Jones winning Rookie of the Year with Ed Carpenter, snatching up a prime seat at Ganassi. You've got Ganassi cutting his team in half from 4 cars to 2. Both those drivers, Max Chilton and Charlie Kimball, still together with the new entry Carlin team. So, Joey, a lot to look forward to in IndyCar. Jump in on any topic you'd like.
Oh, gosh.
I know, there's so much. It's good stuff.
I'd say this. I guess first and foremost, it's exciting to see these changes, and it figures that something like this would happen in a year that's essentially a reset year for the series with the new car. So, I honestly, out of everything that you were talking about, there's a few things I'm super excited about. One of those is seeing Ed Jones move over from Dale Coyne Racing and then moving over to Chip Ganassi, Dixon's teammate. They got a young guy in there, a quick guy who proved himself pretty solidly at Dale Coyne. And it's the first time that I can remember that we really get somebody at Chip Ganassi Racing that was with another team that was really proven since maybe Weldon, or, if you go further back, somebody that was younger, not necessarily already accomplished. You could even go back to Dixon, back when Dixon first started at Chip Ganassi. So this has a good feel for it, a good way to transition. They've scaled back from 4 teams to 2. I think it's good to concentrate the efforts. That said, I'm excited to see what they do. I'm excited to see what Carlin can do. Carlin is a powerhouse throughout the world, and for those that don't know, you want to talk about a team that's dominated junior categories in Europe. They came over here. They've ran Indy Lights. They won the championship with Ed Jones just a couple years ago, and they continue to have success with just winning races in Indy Lights on a regular occasion. So them stepping up this year with Max Chilton and Charlie Kimball, who really it's a transfer from Chip Ganassi Racing duos going over there. So I'm excited to see what happens with that. And I'm also really happy to see somebody like Michael Shank finally get a shot. A lot of people know that in 2012 he bought a body and ended up bought a DW12 chassis and wasn't able to end up running the series, lost a lot of money. And so for him to finally get an opportunity a little bit better than what he had last year running with Andretti in a partnership at Indianapolis, this is a really good stepping stone for him to try to move up to IndyCar, because I feel like Michael Shank is one of those guys, the kind of owner that can just continue to breed success in IndyCar. He's proven on sports cars that he knows how to do the job. He knows how to manage an organization. And I feel like transferring that to IndyCar is only going to help bolster what he can offer IndyCar and how much credibility IndyCar continues to get, because, the television ratings don't lie either. They're going to keep jumping up. We've seen them from 2013 to now jump up from an average of 900,000 to 1.14 million. So having somebody like Schenk in there and Carlin can continue to add prestige to the series, could help bolster the viewership. And I'm excited for it. It's going to be a hell of a year, and I'll be in Phoenix here in a couple weeks whenever they start testing out there at what is now known as ISM Raceway. So it'll be a lot of fun. Excited to get started.
Joey, let me ask you a question. And this is kind of circles back around to the Danica thing. And we talk about these big teams like Ganassi that obviously downsized from some 4 to 2. What did they do with that extra equipment? When I was thinking about, logically, when you look at Danica shopping around her money to a team, you would think that someone like a Ganassi who had depth of equipment, obviously I'm sure they probably downsized their manpower, but you would think that some of these teams that had this equipment previously would be way better, equipped to handle an extra car at Indianapolis than some of these smaller or upstart teams.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. I know they downsized in manpower. I can't say that they did anything with their equipment like what we saw KV Racing do a year ago when most of their assets ended up at Juncos' shop. But it wouldn't surprise me if they actually kept it, because even though the bodies are different, it's still a DW12.
Yeah, the tub and all is the same. All you do is actually skinning it. Yeah.
And when you really, Dale Coyne Racing is the perfect example last year. We saw him go through, they invested in Bourdais, and Bourdais came out of the box and just lit it on fire. And then, he's winning at St. Pete in the season opener. He's up there in the top of the standings for a little while. He goes into the Indy 500, goes through qualifying, is on a rail the whole time, and then just took it a step too far. And we saw him, he even owned up to it and said that he took the car a little bit beyond its limits, and ended up cracking the tub, was out of commission for a couple of months. And they went through a rough stretch after that with Ed Jones and the replacement drivers that came through, where they just continued to run into wrecks. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they actually held on to those bodies just in case, or at least one of those tubs just in case of an event similar to that, because Delar only makes so many of these. They are tough to come by, and I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they held on to that. As far as the other equipment, I wouldn't be surprised either if they tried to sell a little bit to Carlin. But, Carlin has everything else at Chip Ganassi Racing right now, so why not some of the equipment?
Yeah, why not? The interesting thing is, as Chip Ganassi is downsizing, Michael Andretti is going to show up with 6 cars at Indianapolis this year. And I got into a conversation with somebody, and they were talking about money and bringing money to the program and what it costs to run an IndyCar. And I guess their question was, so how come Zach Veach, with just $6 million to bring, can guarantee a full season ride? And the answer to that is actually quite simple, and it's Michael Andretti's business model. You have to have all the basics in place, right? You have to have the shop, the wind tunnel time, the tubs, the cars, the crew, the transporters, all this whatnot. So it might cost you, $13-14 million for a one-car effort, but as you add cars to that, the cost is incrementally less for a third car, a fourth car, a fifth car, a sixth car, because the basics are in place. And the other thing that Michael's done is, when he gets his sponsorship package, he takes that money and spreads it evenly among the team. But say the DHL money doesn't only go on Ryan Hunter cars, Ray. It goes into the common Andretti budget. So does the Napa money, so does the Zach Veach money, so does the other little bit here and there, because somebody said, well, how come, aren't those guys hurting because you've got sometimes that other car is running, Andretti TV as a sponsor. But I think Michael's made this multi-car team business model really work to a T, and he's been perfecting this since he came out of the box in 2003 with a 4-car entry. So, in my mind, Michael's made this work so well, but Ganassi has felt like downscaling is the way to kind of get them back on track. So, I mean, any particular thoughts on that? Maybe Gray, since you've been in this business a long time.
Yeah, I mean, we see that in NASCAR racing with the Cup teams. They do the same thing. You run everything off a common budget. All the money goes in a pot, and you try to run all your teams out. The same with the same. Give them the same equipment week in and week out. So yeah, it's and then the overhead cost go down somewhat. With teams like ours, where we have so many capabilities with our manufacturing and engineering. That's why it even helps with taking on the alliance teams. You kind of pay. They kind of help pay for a lot of the development and a lot of the other things that go on. So yeah, and I'm sure that I don't know what Michael's total business effort is, but I'm sure he probably has. They're probably doing some work for some other folks too as well.
Oh yeah, I mean Michael's got his hands in Formula E and rally cars and everything else, and people keep wondering when is Michael going to announce his NASCAR team, because that has been rumored on and off for several years. So, but we're up against the clock here. We got about 5 minutes left in the show. I want to thank all you guys for coming on. I want to just go around the table quickly and get everybody's final thoughts as we prepare to watch the marathon 24-hour race at Daytona. And I'll start with you, Richard.
Oh, thanks for that.
You're welcome.
No, I think it'll be interesting to see I think the Alonso effect that you saw at Indy probably hasn't had quite the same effect on the Daytona 24. The buzz around him in Indy was huge. I don't think it's been quite the same here, but it'll be interesting to see how these guys equip themselves and go about, again, taking themselves out of the comfort zone and doing something a little bit different. It could be a great race. A bit of rain in there, especially if you get through 20 hours and your car's in one piece, and then the heavens open, and you have to worry about that as well. It could be a really, really good race, and you never know. It may tell if they can run around there in the wet. You never know. Why can't the NASCAR guys run around there in the wet?
Okay. On the road course, maybe I would not want to see a restrictor plate car on the full oval at full speed in the wet. No, thank you. No, thank you.
You want to see it, but it wouldn't last very long.
No. But the road course, the Roval at Charlotte, maybe the Roval at Charlotte. So, Seth, your final thought for the evening?
The saga of BK Racing may finally be coming to an end. The bank seized its 3 haulers, a passenger car, and is seeking a federal court to auction off the building and its assets to cover a $7.2 million debt.
Yikes.
For unpaid taxes, yes.
Yeah, unpaid taxes. They also has a tax lien of about $2.3 million. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they claim they're going to Daytona.
They claim they're going to Daytona, yet the bank is also trying to seize its 2 charters.
That's gonna be one to follow. Yeah, if they show up at Daytona with federal police chasing them,
so here's
locking
an
down their
one
stuff.
So here's an interesting point. Very quickly, I don't want to. And I know we're sort of tight on time, but when a NASCAR vehicle enters a NASCAR race and gets given a certification by NASCAR, it becomes property of NASCAR.
Maybe that's their plan.
So how does that work? Yeah,
Maybe
I don't know.
That's
Maybe
their plan. Yeah.
Sneak it in there without anybody noticing.
Yeah. All right, Gray, your final thought for the evening?
Yeah, looking forward to this weekend. Look, in the 24. Interested to see how of course we're kind of wondering how the Cadillacs are going to do, because those engines come out of our facility. So we're looking at that with a lot of keen interest, and also looking. I'm a big fan of Ganassi's GT effort with the Fords. So want to see them do well this weekend.
Absolutely. Now, Joey.
Oh, it's my turn.
Yeah, it's your turn. I know you've got big plans this season with Motorsports Tribune and with your own personal stuff you're doing too with IndyCar. So, and just allow me just to throw this out there since you won't toot your own horn. Joey was given an award at the Motorsports Rider, the National Motorsports Rider Association.
Press Association.
Association, yeah. Joey came home with an award for spot riding. So good job, Joey. We are proud of you there. But go ahead. What are your final thoughts?
Well, I guess everybody is looking at Alonso and seeing all the diversity, the different places he's racing, Indy, now Rolex. He's looking to gauge this for Le Mans. But I want to just honestly send out a special thank you to Zach Brown, the McLaren boss, United Autosport boss. He's just like Michael Andretti. He's got his hands in a lot of pots, and I think Zach Brown is really the guy who's brought diversity back into motorsports, because before all this, he's really the guy that made it all happen. We hadn't had crossover in years, outside of maybe a NASCAR IndyCar driver going to Rolex. And so to see this kind of crossover where Formula One guys are now, and not just Alonso, we got Lance Stroll, we got McLaren development driver Lando Norris and Rolex. It's good to see, and honestly, outside of just pointing fingers at Fernando, I think we got to look at Zach Brown and just say thanks for bringing in the crossover and bringing it back.
Excellent point there, Joey Barnes. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank the Whoobazoo Radio Network for hosting us. Thank iHeartRadio for carrying us. I want to thank Gray, Seth, Richard, Joey, and Chris, who had to leave us early for a great show tonight. Race fans, we'll talk to y'all next week. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Whoobazoo.com.
Enter website.